is an interview with Doug Voss, Korean DMZ veteran, 6869. This is his story.
Thank you, Wendell. I am a Korean DMZ veteran, and not many people have heard of the DMZ, but I'll tell you the difference between the Korean War and the Korean DMZ. The Korean War was June 25, 1950. It lasted 3 years and 1 month, and the war ended July 27, 1953. There's an armistice, not a peace treaty. The armistice is what we enforced. It was our job when we were in Korea as infantry, artillery, whatever units we were on the DMZ. And at that time, things got hot over there, meaning there were a lot more ambushes, a lot more like the capture of the USS Pueblo, which was January 21, 1968. There was a shoot down of EC-121, which was in, it's March or April of 1969. There were a lot of ambushes of vehicles as well as foot patrols. There were KIAs. And there's an estimate of, we're still trying to get this correct estimate, but it was from the end of the Korean War until today, roughly 98 KIA and about 3 times that amount WIA. The Pueblo crew was taking POW for almost a year. There were 81 members on that ship. And then the EC-121, there were 31 on board. And on that day, it was the worst Cold War incident where the most casualties in one day was from that EC-1 shot down, EC-121 that was shot down in 1969 over the Sea of Japan. So this is just a very quick overview of what was going on in Korea when I was there. But specifically, when I was in basic training, everything was Vietnam. Vietnam was going on. Nobody knew about the Korean DMZ mission. We didn't know a thing until I was at AIT, which is Advanced Infantry Training. I was at Fort Jackson, trained as a wheeled vehicle mechanic, but I never so much as changed a spark plug in a Jeep. They needed infantrymen over on the DMZ quickly. So anybody and everybody who was not assigned to Vietnam went to the DMZ. And we had to patrol the DMZ. We did stakeout on the south side of the DMZ. We did foot patrols. We did tower duty, foxhole duty. There was all kinds of duty. We always were there 24/7, whether it was a blizzard or monsoon or blistering heat. We were there 24/7 to watch the North Koreans because they were infiltrating across the DMZ. And the reason they were doing that, they wanted to try to start an insurgency in South Korea. Now, the reason the insurgency never caught on is threefold. One is the South Koreans hated, and when I say hated communism, they did, and they still do to this day. Then there were the ROC soldiers. They were some of the roughest and toughest, and some of their divisions went to Vietnam, and they were so fierce with their fighting that I don't even want to say what they did to the VC, but the VC were scared of the North Korean soldiers. Or excuse me, repeat, South Korean soldiers and the ROC military, because the ROCs, which is Republic of Korea, that is the official name of South Korea. So things were a bit hot over there, and I did some infantry duty, but then there came an opening for a recovery specialist, and that is when something that gets stuck, it breaks down, or in our case along the DMZ, we're shot up, blown up, or whatever. It was our job to go out and retrieve these vehicles and bring them back to the motor pool. And there are some pictures here, Wendell can show them here later, that of those vehicles that were blown up, shot up, and disabled, and the occupants were wounded, or KIA. So we got $65 a month hostile fire pay, which is combat pay. It was the same pay that the Vietnam vets got. However, ours was okayed by the Department of Defense, and the $65 hostile fire pay for Vietnam troops was okayed by executive order, and that was President Johnson at that time. So there is a slight difference. We had to pay for our own postage. Are we complaining? We never complained about that. The poor guys in Vietnam had a full-scale war. Ours was more like a guerrilla war. If you can think of small unit tactics, squad or platoon-sized tactics. The North Koreans were trained with, let's see, it was the 124th Infiltration Brigade. And it took them 2 years of training so they could infiltrate across the DMZ and not even be noticed or heard. And if they get across the DMZ, then they came up against our fence. We had a barrier fence. That was nothing more than a cyclone fence, and there was triple barrel concertina wire at the top. In other words, razor wire. And a barrel is about that big, maybe about that big around. And it was almost impossible for them to go over that. They did use ladders. They tried ladders early on when they were just one single barrel. And then they would go underneath the cyclone fence. And so to fix that, they drove stakes in the ground about that wide, 2 inches wide, maybe 3/4 of an inch thick, and they'd drive it into the ground maybe a foot to 18 inches with a sharp point. And that pretty much stopped the North Koreans from going under the barrier fence. But they would still bring some really strong wire cutters with them, and they would cut through that cyclone fence within seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could get a squad through there that quick. And they would do it when the weather was inclement, raining, nasty, or it was totally dark. No moon, the clouds were overhead, no stars. And we did not have starlight scopes yet. We couldn't use infrared scopes because infrared scopes were, they sent out a infrared beam, but it's not seen by the human eye, but there were devices that could pick that beam up on the communist side of the DMZ. So we didn't use them. When we finally got our starlight scopes, they were about that big around, little bigger than a Pringles can, about that long, and I think they weighed 7 pounds. They were heavy, but you could see in the night. Even though the images were grainy, then the American troops and Iraq troops, we took the night away from the North Koreans. That was their infiltration time. So that's the DMZ conflict ended December 31st, 1969. And there still were infiltrations, but not to the degree that they had them in the mid-60s, there, 66 to 69. So there's a lot of, let's see here, I'm looking through my references here. There were a lot of, here's one patrol that is really interesting. This is when President Johnson visited South Korea, actually Seoul, South Korea. He stayed at the Walker Resort. It was the best place they had in Seoul at that time. But November 3, 1966, there was an ambush of a patrol, 8 members, and 7 of them were KIA. The one that lived, he was wounded, but he laid perfectly still. He laid on his stomach, and the North Koreans took his watch off him and whatever else they could find, and he was able to keep composure and just limp. He lived through it, and I can't imagine what he went through. And then maybe PTSD and some other flashbacks or things like that. But there was a young soldier, his name was Ernest Reynolds. Ernest was in Korea for about 10 days, and when you walk patrol as a newbie, you're going to be the last man in the patrol. You can see what's going on in front of you, and when the squad leader does this, freeze, or he says down, or 2 infantrymen walking 270 degrees, something like that, you had to watch the hand signal. And so he did. He hit the ground. but all the others were hit and KIA. But Reynolds was the last one. We had M14s at that time. He took his M14 and he stood up and he just sprayed the North Koreans, and then they killed him, sprayed him back. And the North Koreans used what is called a I gotta think of the name of this. It's a machine gun. PPSH-41 is the name of it. It's a drum barrel about that big, held 71 rounds. You'd burp it, and within about 15 seconds, the whole thing would be emptied. I can't, it was a terror weapon. So that's what they used on trucks as well as patrols. And part of the armistice were stipulations that there's supposed to be no automatic weapons in the DMZ. The North Koreans had them almost from the get-go, and finally the United States, we didn't use M60s, but we did use our weapons. We'd flick them to automatic, and then we'd spray the North Koreans. Another story I'll tell you is, from that era, there was let's see here, Bill Minot. He's deceased now. But Bill was a Spec 4, and he was on patrol. They got jumped. North Koreans hit the whole patrol, and there were a few wounded. I don't have the numbers there, but North Korean took off for North Korea, and he ran like a football player with a football heading for the touchdown line. And he caught the North Korean. He tackled him and held him, and then a couple other guys from the patrol came up there and held him, the North Korean as well. And he actually got a promotion out of that. He was at Spec 4, and they jumped him right over Sergeant E5 to Staff Sergeant. And he also was offered a chance to go to OCS, and he took him up on it. So the last thing, he was awarded the Bronze Star for he saved some lives, and he also caught a North Korean that could be interrogated. So he finished the Army as a colonel. He was in 20 years, and he just recently passed away. He lived in Indianapolis, and I feel sad I couldn't go down. I couldn't, maybe didn't, but go visit Bill, because all the other guys that knew him say he was very gentle. He's a very cool, calm, collected kind of guy. In battle, no, he was a soldier. This is what everybody says of him. So I've got a lot of pictures here. Here's another story. Now, this name is not anything to do with race. There was a German Shepherd by the name of Blackie. He was a black German Shepherd with just a little bit of tan in him. And the handler had him on patrol. He was at point. And at that time, it wasn't unusual to have sentry dogs used for patrols in the DMZ, because they could sniff out a North Korean better than we could ever even think of. Well, Blackie did. He sniffed out the Koreans. They were in some brush. I think it was 3 or 4 of them. And they were hunkered down and couldn't even tell they were there. Blackie rushed them after Terrell. That was the name of the Spec 4 Terrell. He was the handler, and he let the dog go, and the dog rushed the North Koreans. North Koreans killed the dog and wounded Terrell. He lived, and this is what it is in the military. Dogs are used as part of our tactics. But the handlers, they get used to these dogs and they get attached to them. And you hear stories right up to this modern day of the dogs used. And their handlers will eventually sometimes get that dog. I've got another instance here. This is dusk, May 21st, 1967. Korean People's Army saboteur set up 2 satchel loads by the Quonset hut. Quonset hut is shaped like this. It's like a half moon. There's a door on each end. These infiltrators put a couple of satchels charges at the back door, set the timer for just before the sun comes up, and it blew up. It was 1st Platoon, A companies, first to the 23rd. Never knew what hit them. The thing is, the amazing thing is, there were 2 KIA but 16 wounded. I mean, this is sometimes the way it is in war. But the 2 KIAs, everyone got Purple Hearts out of this. But they don't go in the army to get Purple Hearts. But that's what they were awarded. So that was pity. There were instances where the North Koreans would sabotage railroads heading into Seoul. There was a railhead in Munsan-ni. Munsan-ni was the closest town to the DMZ, but we used to go on past into Munsan-ni. But there was a railhead where supplies would come in by rail or vehicles or tracks by track, meaning APC M113 or an M114, and they would bring them up and offload them at the railhead there in Munsan-ni. Well, the track between Seoul and Munsan-ni was a couple times was sabotaged. There was massive train wrecks. Our general here, General Bonesteel, what a name, huh? He was our commanding general of the 8th Army, and he also was commander of the UN contingency at the JSA. I'll talk about the JSA a little bit here. And it shows him awarding a Purple Heart to a wounded soldier. He was pretty well bandaged up. And let's see, what else do we have here? I want to talk about the DMZ itself. It was a 5-layer defense, patterned after the McNamara line in Vietnam. They had a similar 5-layer defense. The 5 layers are the MDL, meaning military demarcation line. That's the actual physical boundary between North and South Korea. Just maybe 100 yards or so, 100 meters, the GPs were. GP is guard post. That is where a platoon would have 2 squads in the GP and 1 out in the DMZ patrolling, and they would rotate around. And that's the first layer, the GPs. The patrols was the second layer. Minefields. Minefields were, they still are, on both sides of the MDL, close to the southern limit and the northern limit. And there's an estimated just about 1 million mines on each side. We still hold the record. The border between Russia and Ukraine is heavily mined, but not quite that many. But who knows? That war is not over yet. And who knows, that might be the DMZ might be a pattern for their eventual armistice, if that's what it ends in. Okay. And the next is the barrier fence itself. That is there's a sand, I call it a sand pit, but it's about 10 feet wide, and it goes the whole length of the DMZ. And the reason the sand is if there's any infiltrators that got through, they would see footprints in the sand. Immediately, because the infiltrators are so good at their craft, but our kill ratio was three North Koreans to 1 American. So we did our job at losses, and then there was the foxholes all along the DMZ. They were roughly the topography in Korea is mostly large hills and a lot of mountains. So sometimes they were inaccessible. The roads and the mountains just like this constantly. So the foxholes weren't spaced evenly apart, but they were spaced where it was easy enough access. But and then at the peaks, they would have towers so they could see out over the DMZ. And I used to do a lot of stakeouts, and this is the 6th, actually the 6th layer added for because of the infiltrations, that we would be the last one if the infiltrators got through, and then we'd take them out if that ever happened. Or we would be the first if there are any exfiltrators going back to North Korea. So it's a 5-layered defense, and when I was there, they added the 6th layer. And without boring everybody, let's see here. I said I would get over to the JSA. And I got a picture of myself here. I got a picture of friends. One of the duties that I had over there is at a place called OP Maisie. That's Observation Post Maisie. That was actually, just like it says, an observation post. It was a high point along on the outside, we call it the good side, the free side of the DMZ. They would have mock patrols. In other words, we dressed up like we were going to go on a patrol, but we had dignitaries coming there, congressmen, senators. I remember seeing some from Canada, Thailand. Let's see. I know there was Australia. There was because they were all in the Korean War. But anyways, these dignitaries would set up on bleachers, and the battalion commander or the XO would explain, "This is what our patrols do. This is PFC Voss. He has the PRC 25 on his back, and he's right with the squad leader. He's also a rifleman. Next to him is PFC Jones. He is a rifleman. And then we have our grenadier. It could be Kalinowski. But anyways, right on down the line of what a patrol it was, what it did, and then the battalion commander would go over to like a whiteboard, and there would be a map of Korea, map of the DMZ. He would be there with his pointer, and he would point out certain prominent points, like where the JSA is, where what used to be the tallest flag. North Korea thought they had the tallest flag, but that's not the case anymore. I think one of the Middle Eastern nations has the tallest flag now. But anyway, that was good duty. And what they wanted was some soldiers that were, a word we used when I was in the Army, they were strapped. You know, we were military. We loved the Army, and they didn't want somebody that's going to kind of slough up there and not be looking like a soldier. Anyways, that was good duty. It was interesting duty. This is where I learned a lot about the DMZ. Was at OP Maisie. So let's see. Now we're going to go up to. I have a picture of. Here's an incident that happened March 15th, 1969. Now they had right where I said the MDL is. The MDL, the military demarcation line. There were signs on sign posts that were made out of concrete. The posts were sturdy and hardy, and then there were signs on there. Hangul is the alphabet of the Koreans, and then there was the Chinese, the Mandarin alphabet. So it was on both sides of that post, so the North Koreans could see it, and then we could see it. Now those signs were about like this. They were yellow, maybe even bigger than this, so you couldn't miss them. And there were maintenance patrols to always check and see if those signs were taken down by the North Koreans, because sometimes they would do that. So they could, South Koreans or Americans would accidentally go across the line, and they would cut the barbed wire, so you wouldn't even see where you're at. And we had to be extremely careful when we were near there. But anyways, there was a maintenance patrol there. There was some Korean contractors who actually did the work of changing the signs or putting new signs up. And all of a sudden, North Koreans ambushed the whole patrol, as well as the Korean contractors. So they called in for ambulance, and these were serious wounds, very serious. So they called 121st evac, which was in Seoul, and requested a helicopter medevac come up to the DMZ, pick up 3 wounded. And there were a few that died while they were waiting for the helicopter. So the helicopter landed. They quickly lowered the 3 wounded on. There was a pilot, co-pilot, a medic, a nurse, and a doctor there, tending to the most serious wound. The helicopter took off. It was up maybe 100 feet or so, and all of a sudden it just went boom. It was said through the investigation that it got a hold of some commo wire. People know what commo wire is. It's very strong and tough stainless steel. But other people say they swore they heard gunfire coming from North Korea. So to this day, I'm going to leave it as that. It's one or the other, and I can't say which it is. But all 8 on board perished in that crash. And I got a picture of the helicopter here in pieces, and they got all the bodies out of there, but not all the parts of the bodies. So I'll leave it as that. You know, stop. Go. Okay. Now, let's see. I want to get to the JSA here. I get pictures of me and Army buddies that I met after I got out. There was one thing along the barrier fence here. I have a picture. I don't know. Some people have, if the people watching this have heard of flue gas, it's like napalm, just about the same. It's like a jellified gasoline. Well, we'd have pits about like this round and about that deep, full of it. And everyone along the barrier had a clicker like you use for Claymore mine, and it would light off the flue gas. So the if any infiltrators got close to that, it's dual purpose. It can actually take the infiltrator out, but it'll light up the area for a little bit. And once in a while, we'd have to call 4-deuce motors. We'd call it TOC, Technical Operation Command. We would have to call them first, and they would approve mission if you needed some illumination at night. So it was usually 5 rounds, maybe more, but usually 5 rounds would be fired up, and they were timed just right, at the right altitude. And my hooch was right next to their mortar pit. So, you know, at the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, you hear, boom! A 4-deuce mortar is loud, and you can actually feel the ground shake in our Quonset hut. You know, we have the cement apron, and then the Quonset hut was built over that. But you could actually feel the vibration in the floor. Well, thanks for waking me up, you know. But we knew that was a fire mission. If it was an actual attack by North Korea, we would be inundated by officers and NCOs. Get to your trench and go now, you know. But we knew when it was a firefight. There would always be 5 rounds. But not a firefight, but sometimes it might be. But there would be 5 rounds up, and it's kind of cool to see these things fluttering down under a parachute, and they flicker the magnesium underneath the parachute, and sometimes that flickering in the woods or in the thicket or whatever, it looked like somebody's moving. So to be sure, you know, you open up on it. You know, we call it a ghost firefight. You know, you just spray the whole area. And nobody was there, but the dancing of those flares is something to see. There were 4 tunnels tunneled under the DMZ. Now let's see here. There's one in 1974. That was the first one found. I was out of the Army by then. 1975, there was another one right under the DMZ. It was a little larger. It still enough for troops. Then there was one that a Jeep could go through. That was, let's see, 1978. There's another one, the Tunnel 4. These are the only tunnels that have been discovered thus far. This had a railroad track going through it. They could take troops and whatever else. And then there were submersible boats and submarines that would land infiltrators on shore. So there was a shore guard, and that was mostly taken care of by South Korean Navy. So, but they also had observers that would, just like during World War II, like civil defense observers, and Korea had their companion to that. So, now here's a lot of pictures here. I'm going to go through these. I have a lot of clippings here, a lot of clippings for the proof of the casualties on the Korean DMZ back when I was there. So now we have the let's see, the home of the Freedom Building. That's in South Korea, and then opposite of that is Panmunjom Hall. That is 1 click. A click is a kilometer away from Panmunjom, where the actual armistice was signed July 27, 1953. There are, let's see, there's 3 blue buildings, and then on each of those buildings is one that's grayish color on each side. The blue buildings are where they had MAC meetings, Military Armistice Commission meetings. This is where either side, North Korea or South Korea, could lodge complaints violating the terms of the armistice. North Korea, the exact numbers aren't, there's debates from all my research, anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000. And that is a lot. And that's since the end of the war, and right up into right now with the rockets and the nukes. So if you remember when Trump and Kim Jong-un got together and they walked across the MDL, well, they walked between these two buildings here, and I believe it was Building 2 and Building 3. And then they walked back across, and then Trump stayed on the south side and Kim Jong-un on the north side. So if you're wondering what blue buildings are, just if you ever saw that, it's also on YouTube. But Koreans have taken that over now. They've had it for quite a few years. I think 1991 was, October 31st, 1991 was the last patrol, American patrol on the DMZ, and the ROCs took it over from there. And the ROCs, yes, they are the toughest hombres, especially in Korea. Martial arts, they had a demonstration for us on how to do Taekwondo. That is the national martial arts in Korea. And those guys, they look like they're chiseled. I mean, they're slender, they're skinny, but they're all muscle. And they can throw somebody right on the ground, and they take your leg and do a toe first roundhouse or a heel first roundhouse. Catch them under the chin, catch them in the reproductive organs, and we learned a lot from those guys. The MPs that were in the DMZ, it is the DMZ. It's in the DMZ, but the JSA is right in the middle of the DMZ. The MPs had to be at least 6 foot. Most of them were 6'2" or 6'4". And the reason for that, the North Korean guards, it's the only place on the whole DMZ or all of Korea where the U.S. soldiers and North Korean soldiers can actually mingle. But the North Koreans, they would taunt the soldiers, and there would be fist fights right in the middle of this, right to those blue buildings, and they would just be banging on each other. Well, General Bonesteel, enough of that. We're going to get some big MPs. We're going to get intimidating MPs. They'll stand like this and have guns like that. And they'll be big bad guys. And the North Koreans, they tried to play tough with these guys. And I have a picture here where there's a Korean. His fist is back like this, ready to hit the MP who's this tall. Well, the story that I had heard is that the MP just one hit, he decked that North Korean, just went down like out for the count. But the North Koreans wanted to prove that they were tough and they were fearless. And some of those that were chosen to go to the DMZ, yes, they were definitely it was Kim Il-sung when I was there. That's the grandfather. The next one was Kim Jong-il. That's the father. And now there's Kim Jong-un. And there's his sister. She's also Kim, and his daughter is around 10 or 11 years old. And I forgot her name as well. But Kim Jong-un, I think, is trying to get us to think now, who's going to be a successor, his sister or his daughter? They play mind games like that. That's their MO. Okay, now we're getting near the end. Okay, now here's an incident that happened in 1976. Gerald Ford was president at that time. This happened in the JSA. There was a crew of engineers that were taking some limbs out of a tree so that an observation post could see into North Korea. Because the poplar trees were about yay tall when I was there, but in 76 they got much taller, and you couldn't see what was going on there. So the crew was there. North Korea was notified that the trees will be trimmed, but one of the guards, his name is Senior Lieutenant Pak, a.k.a. Bulldog. Everybody called him because he looked like a bulldog, and he knew English. That's why they I think North Korea put him there. But there was a melee that started. first of all, Bulldog was yelling at the Captain Boniface, and what was the other one? There was another lieutenant. Here we go. Let's get this one here. I'm glad I got this because I forgot these names. Captain Boniface and First Lieutenant Barrett were second in command. He was yelling at these two, get your soldiers out of here. That tree was planted by our dear leader, Kim Il-sung. And that's kind of stuff that would be provoking. And you know, they were taught to always turn your back on them. That's an insult. Well, this time, Lieutenant Pak, a.k.a. Bulldog, told his men, attack! And in Korean, and he had, I think it was 14 men. Let's see, do I have the stats? But anyways, they went at the American soldiers. Now, again, we would abide by the terms of the armistice. Not everyone was armed. You know, in the JSA was different than the regular DMZ. You know, everyone had to be armed. You know, at least with a rifle. But they went after the two officers. They used axe handles and other weapons, and they bludgeoned those two to death. And then there were, I'm trying to find the stats here, of the wounded. Let's see. But anyways, I believe there were 6 or 7 wounded. Anyways, this is 76, and the election was coming up that fall. Carter was against Ford. So Ford held an emergency cabinet meeting, and Kissinger said, why didn't you have bombers bomb the barracks over in North Korea? And Kissinger was just livid, you know, and a lot of Scowcroft, who was another name of his entourage of advisors, and let's see here, come on. Okay, what it came down to is that the decision was to have the largest ever show of force. Now, one of the most important aviators back in the 50s, let's see if I can get his name here. He was the pilot who broke the sound barrier. This bothers me. I can't find it. But anyways, he was Yeager. Thank you. Yes. Chuck Yeager. He broke the sound barrier. He was the leader of a wing of F-4 Phantoms. They also had back then the F-111s, the swing wing bombers, and the 7th Fleet assembled off to the East Shore. And the Special Forces of South Korea was called up, and at that back in let's see, not that many years ago, President Moon Jae-in was the president of South Korea, and I have a picture of him as a young, stern-faced ROK soldier. He was airborne, or Special Forces, I should say, but it worked. North Korea, it's the only time they ever, it's not a total admission of doing killing the Americans, but it was a, I want to get the right word here, we regret. North Korea said, we regret what happened in the JSA, almost verbatim. It's the only time they ever admitted, or close to admission, but the show of force kind of showed North Korea that you know, we even today, if we can assemble a good show of force, sometimes it does work. And so that incident was, I don't know, it's one that whenever they talk about the DMZ on TV, that's the one they'll talk about. But the era that I served in, you won't hardly hear it on TV at all. And it's, well, us guys that served there, in a way we feel slighted. And when we say we served in Korea on the DMZ, people think Korean War. Oh, you were in the Korean War. You look too young for Korean War. Well, I am. I was only just a little toddler when the Korean War was going on. So, what I want to do here is make sure if I can make a distinction between the Korean DMZ conflict, which again was November 2nd, 1966 to December 31st, 1969. 15 years earlier, from 68, was the end of the Korean War. But again, I'll do this again. The Korean War started June 25, 1950. North Korea came across the border with 80,000 troops, along with, I believe it was 120 Russian-made T-34 tanks. And they captured Seoul in 3 days. And that was a rough and ready team of soldiers, because the year before, just the year before, Mao Zedong, the communist leader, had won the Civil War in China. And that Civil War is still their birth of communist China that we see today. So that was like a baptism by fire. There was a lot of North Koreans that fought in that war on the communist side. So those North Koreans had some experience. Now, not all of them. I'd say roughly half were actual soldiers that fought with the Chinese in the Chinese Civil War. But there's a lot that goes on. Now, while I'm almost done here, I don't have this on my computer, but there is a war I want to tell people about that was in 1969 and 1970. It was between China and Russia. Now, there's an island that's just east or sort of east of Mongolia. There's a river that kind of runs on the outside of Mongolia, and then there's an island right in the middle of it. And it's not a big island. I would say if it's 100 acres. But those two were fighting over that, but they were also fighting over whose communism is best. And this is kind of important because Asia, things were hot over there. And I didn't realize how hot it was. I mean, you have two communist nations battling each other. You have us, keeping the North Koreans north of the border, and Vietnam. We can't forget about Vietnam. No, I wasn't in Vietnam, but there's other vets I hope can tell those stories here too. But let's see, I'm just about done here. The last thing I would like to say is the DMZ is also known as the Accidental Animal Preserve. There are musk deer, there are water deer. There's the Korean lynx. There's the knapneck crane. It's a big, long neck with a black stripe down its neck. It's kind of a neat bird. Stilt legs on it like this. The deer, the water deer, they make a screeching noise, and when you hear them at night and you're a young GI over there, it'll unnerve you. It sounds like a scream of a woman, and it's yeah, whoa, maybe I'm supposed to be out here to DMZ. But there's also the Amur leopard. That's the largest predator in the DMZ, but it used to be the Siberian tiger. Now, the Japanese occupied Korea from 1910 until the end of World War II, when the war ended. That was August, it was in the teens, and then from that point on, the occupation forces, Russia in the north, United States in the south, and it's been it's still communist, and it's still freedom. And poor South Korea, right now, they're not poor. They were when I was there. Thatched huts, and dirt floors. Now, if Korean farmer had a little more money, he could have a wooden floor, and underneath it, they used to have these charcoal bricks. Place them along underneath the floor and have exhaust that gets the smoke out. And they could keep their floors warm in the winter, because Korean winters, I'm here to tell you, are wicked. I mean, Arctic cold. Anybody who served there can tell you. We always made a joke. It's so cold that the wind doesn't even want to go around you; it just goes through you. It's also the Sarge was. You can see his mouth move, and but you got. Oh, there's Sarge's words on the ground. Quick, get your helmet up. Take him inside and melt the words. You numbskulls, make sure that you have an extra pair of socks with you because when we get to our ambush site and you have your Mickey Mouse boots on, you're going to need to change because your feet are going to sweat. And if you stand still, that sweat draws the cold right in and you'll get frostbite. Do you understand? So, yeah, but we'll say things like that, because it was cold. And North Korea, as we know, is very right now. Kim Jong Un is jumping for joy because the country that helped him, now he's helping them with 1 million artillery shells. We don't know how old those shells are. Some of them probably are junk. They're usually good for 15, 20 years at the most. So what else did he send him? Some missiles, some short-range missiles. But yeah, he's kind of on cloud nine. And Kim Jong Un, he's known to send out some of his workers, so to speak. It's almost like slavery. Put them into a connex or a what am I trying to think of? The big long on God. They're containers. They would fill them with North Koreans and then send them to any country that wants to pay for them. Now, the Koreans are actually used as slaves, the North Koreans. The money went to Kim Jong Un, but the promise was to the nation. And I used to have a list of some of the nations: Eastern Europe. Let's see, not Asia, but I think South America. I would have to get the names of the nations. But the all they asked for was food and a place for these workers to sleep, and the money all goes to North Korea. That's how he's getting some of his money. So I could go on and on, folks, and I'm getting to the end here, running out of breath. And I hope this can help people understand the difference between the DMZ and the Korean War. And remember, Korea now, South Korea, we want to keep our troops there. We don't want to bring them home because things can get hot over there all of a sudden. And maybe North Korea might want to try to take South Korea if our troops do happen to be brought back home. So that's just an opinion. So, Wendell, thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug, for that very amazing